Hi guys, my name is Kristen Grunder from Grunderfully Delicious. Welcome to our online cookie class. So I want everyone to have their little kit ready. I'm just going to go over and let you know what is in this taco kit. We have our icing. We're just going to set that out. Our cookies, we're going to just take all those out as well. Our featured flavor this month is churro. It is delicious. We have sprinkles. You should have some airbrush color. And this right here is going to have everything that we need to get started. So we have our practice sheet, our scribe tool, a marker, paintbrush, a template, as well as some extra piping bags in case you cut your hole too big. So let's get started. All right, so go ahead and take out that practice sheet that you have. And also your little template, we're going to set that aside, and your little photo of the cookies that we're doing. They're just so cute. We've got our scribe tool, and we're just going to set this stuff aside to where we have it ready for us. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and start our practice sheet. So while you guys are watching me demonstrate this practice sheet, go ahead and start giving your bags a nice massage. I also want to mention before we get started, while you're massaging your bags, just make sure you have a paper towel in front of you as well as a pair of scissors. This part is probably the most important part of class, and that's how we cut our piping bag. Now, if you cut your hole too big, what's going to happen is the icing is going to come out too fast. If you cut your hole too small, the icing is going to come out kind of curly on you. So you want to just pay attention. You always want to cut a little bit smaller than you think you need on this bag. So if you feel, we're going to actually practice with this yellow. So if you feel your bag, there is a seam. I like to have that pointed up, facing the ceiling, centered, and then I flatten the tip with my fingers. I'm going to cut a tiny hole, even smaller than I think I need. My goal is to get my yellow icing as thick as this black line. So if you haven't taken this class with me before, or any class with me, make sure you watch this whole practice sheet before you guys go ahead and start. But I'm going to go ahead, I like to dampen my paper towel. When I cut my bag, I always squeeze a little bit out onto my paper towel to make sure that I get all that air out. The way that I hold my bag is I pinch that tape with my thumb and my pointer finger, and I roll the pod so it's nice and tight. While I am holding that tape closed, because even though it's there, it's not going to prevent the icing from coming up, I'm always, I'm gonna press with these three fingers. So I'm squeezing this tape closed, pressing with these fingers in the palm of my hand. I also like to hold my wrist steady, and I'm holding my bag at a slight slant. I touch my tip to the cookie, I squeeze, and as soon as the icing hits the paper, I'm lifting my tip about an inch high and just letting the icing fall on the line. And because I'm lifting an inch high, I'm going to release the pressure early, finish the line, and lay that tip down. If your line is breaking, that means you're not putting enough pressure on the bag. If it's squiggly, either you're squeezing too hard or you're not, or your hole is too small. So again, I start by touching my tip on the paper, I squeeze, I lift immediately. I'm lifting about an inch high, letting the icing fall, and then I release the pressure, lay that down. You always want to keep your tip clean, so I'm often just swiping this, but you can wipe it on your paper towel, you can lick it. I just want to show you something real quick, kind of match the color. I want to show you how high I lift my tip, because that's really important that you're not dragging. So I touch my tip on the paper, I squeeze, I lift, and I just let that icing fall on the line. So I'm lifting about an inch high. Release the pressure, lay the rest down. So I'm going to show you the rest of this practice sheet, and then you guys can go for it. With the waves and the curls, I still start by touching my tip on the paper. I squeeze just the same as before, also lifting, but this time I'm going a little bit slower, and I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall. And then when I'm ready to stop, I release the pressure, lay the rest down, give my tip a little swipe. So if your line is curling here, you're probably either squeezing too hard or you need to cut that hole just a touch more. So again, I'm looking ahead of where I want that icing to fall. I'm still lifting, release the pressure, lay that down. And then the circle, just like before, but even slower. So lift, look a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall. Whoa. And just trying to control that icing, just a soft amount of pressure, just enough for that line to not break. And then release that pressure, lay the tip down. And lastly here, what I'm showing you with the heart is every edge or corner, you want to put the tip back down, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have a starting point, my tip is touching, I squeeze and I lift, but when I get down to this point, I'm going to put my tip back down. So it goes down right here, and then I lift up again. And this is how I regain control of that icing, as well as get nice sharp points or corners or edges. And that is it. So when you guys are done practicing this sheet, you're going to take out your little mustache template and parchment paper. Okay, so go ahead and work on that. Pause this video, and yeah. All right, so now that you're done with your practice sheet, you're going to take out your black icing, give that a massage while you're watching this instruction. So anytime I do a demo here on the screen, if you can just make sure you're watching so you don't miss anything, and then you can just pause it, and yeah. But I have this template here. We're going to make royal icing transfers, and the reason I like to make transfers is because if you look at the photo of the cactus, his little taco and mustache is kind of hanging off of the side a little bit, it's the side of the cookie, and the only way to create that is to allow your little design to crust and then peel them off and stick onto the cookie. So we're actually going to work on these transfers so we can get them drying. If you have a fan, it will be helpful to use a fan to dry your transfers faster. Also, I like to use a little clipboard for my parchment, but if you do end up using a fan, you want to tape this onto something flat, so maybe a book, and then put it in front of a fan, because if you don't tape it, it's going to fly away. So I'm going to go ahead and just scooch mine on there, and I'm going to take my little template right here and just set it under the parchment. So I'm going to take my black, and remember, when we're cutting our bag, we're always cutting a little smaller because we can always adjust, but that seam is centered, and I'm flattening the tip. I'm going to cut a small hole straight across, squeeze the air out of the bag. There we go, looks good. And we're going to start outlining these templates. So I start by holding that parchment down, and I touch my tip onto the paper, squeeze, and lift, just like we practiced. I'm looking ahead of where I want that icing line to fall, and I'm outlining one side of the mustache, the left side first, and then I'm going to do these two as well. I'm just going to show you on one here, but you guys are going to outline all three. Once you're ready for the other side, you're going to scooch the template over just a touch, because we want these sides of the mustaches to be separate from each other. We want them to dry quicker, and the only way to do that is to allow space. So I'm lifting here, and I'm going to trace this side. So again, I'm just showing you on one mustache here, but you guys are going to outline all three mustaches, leaving space in between each side. Then you'll come over to your tacos with the yellow, lift and trace. My tip touched in the beginning, and now it's lifting, and now it's going to touch again, just like we practiced with that heart, and then I'm going to connect. So I want you to outline all 6 before filling them in. Once all 6 are outlined, you can actually cut this black hole just a touch more. I'm not going much more than the outline hole, but just a little bit more will help you fill that in. So outline all 6 mustaches, all 6 tacos, and then you'll come back and we're going to actually touch our tip to the parchment. We're not lifting here, and I'm squeezing the bag, especially now holding that tape closed. But as I squeeze, icing is coming out, and I'm pushing it with the tip of my bag. So the puffier that you make these, the longer it will take to dry. You want it just puffy enough to where the icing smooths out. But since you're doing this at home, you really can puff them up as much as you'd like, and just apply them, let them sit under the fan for a long time. So I fill that in. If you need to, you can take your scribe and kind of jiggle the surface, but if you dig your scribe into this mustache, you're going to keep getting peaks, okay? So you want to do most of the work of smoothing out the icing with the tip of your bag. So I fill this in, jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And again, I'm not lifting my tip here. I'm just above the parchment, just a touch. And I'm jiggling and smoothing out until the surface is nice and smooth. And then I'll take my yellow. You may not need to cut your yellow hole bigger, but if you do, then just a touch, a teeny tiny touch bigger, and you'll fill in the yellow for the taco. The yellow icing is a bit runnier, so you may not need as big of a hole to fill it in. So what you guys are going to do now, I'm going to finish mine, but you guys go ahead and work on yours. You want 3 mustaches and 3 tacos. Make sure that each mustache is not touching each other, that there's a space in between. And then you're going to set those aside. If you have a fan, great. Go ahead and set it in front of a fan, but make sure you have tape or something to hold it down. Otherwise, it's going to take a little bit longer to dry than the 2 hours for class, but it will dry within, about 3 or 4 hours. I have finished all of mine, and this is what they look like. I'm going to go ahead and set this in front of a fan, and then once you're done with that, you can go ahead and take out the cookies out of the bags. All right, guys, so you're going to take your cookies out, and we're going to go ahead and get started. When you're handling the margarita cup, just make sure that you're handling it very gently because it is fragile. Anytime I pick it up, I kind of put my hand underneath the whole cookie rather than lift it like that or like that, especially when there's icing on there. You want to make sure that you scoop it and are extremely gentle with it. Don't ask me why I picked such a fragile cookie, but I did. Okay, so we're gonna start. I'm gonna show you our first steps on each of these cookies. I'm just going to show you on one of each of mine, but when you guys go for it, you're going to outline both of your margaritas, both of your tacos, both of your cacti, I don't know. But yeah, so I'll show you once on here. You can pause or rewind if you need to see anything again. Go ahead and start massaging your green bags. So if you see, there's 2 different greens. There's a dark green and a light green. The margarita is the dark green, the dark green margarita. The light green is for the cactus and the lettuce. So I'm taking my dark green and massage this one really, really well because this is our loosest consistency icing. It's a lot thinner than the other colors, but I'm gonna go ahead and center the seam, flatten the tip, small hole straight across, squeeze the air out, and we're just taking this dark green and we're going to apply it to the margarita. If you look at the photo, it looks like an open cup. So you want to just spread a bunch of dark green on there and take your paintbrush and just brush that smooth. You want it to be, it's okay if you cover a wider area than you need. It's better to cover a little too much of an area. But you don't want it too thick. If you just don't want to see cookie underneath. You want it thin enough to where it's pretty smooth, but thick enough to where you don't see cookie underneath. So I'm just brushing until it's nice and smooth. If I added too much, I'll just wipe it off. But we're gonna go ahead and do that with the margarita. And then make sure you wipe this brush clean. We're gonna need it for our next step as well as later on when we do our splatter. So just wipe that off right away so you don't get crusties on it. Then you're gonna come over to your cactus your little cactus guy, and you're gonna take your yellow, and again, look at the picture, the hat is open underneath. So we're going to do the painting effect on this. So I'm taking my brush that I just used to paint the margarita. I'm gonna paint this hat. Again, painting a wider area than I think I need, because again, this is gonna be covered with icing. So if you did too wide of an area, it's all gonna get covered. So I'm just gonna go ahead and paint that. There we go. And then we're gonna outline. Again, I'm wiping this brush off nicely so that I don't get crusties on there. And then I'm going to outline my taco. I want these base, what we painted, to crust for a minute. So that's why I'm not outlining my cactus yet, which we'll do next. But I want the base to dry, because if I were to outline the hat right now on a wet base, the outline would kind of melt and spread, so I want that to crust for a minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and outline my taco. I wanna leave room for toppings, so I'm bringing my line about an inch, inch and a half in. I'm lifting, and I'm just looking at the line above. I wanna keep space for my lettuce, my tomatoes, and I just messed up. Oh man, every class I mess up. It's okay though, because we have this little scribe tool doohickey thing. So whatever you mess up on, you just wipe off. So I actually don't like how I did any of this, so I'm gonna wipe the whole thing off. But if you guys, you just wipe off really what you messed up on. Take my paper towel, wipe that off. Don't wipe off the whole cookie like I just did, but I wanna start over. Okay, so tip is touching, just like we practiced. I lift, looking ahead of where I want that to fall, and then my tip goes back down and connect. All right, so there is our taco. Now we can go back to our cactus, and in just a minute you guys can go ahead and do that. So your first step will be painting on the margarita and the hat, then outlining both tacos, and then by then this will have crusted enough for us to outline the hat. And I'm going to zoom in right here so you guys can have a better view. Scooch those off to the side. This is probably our challenge cookie, I would say. So I want to make sure everyone is watching this outline. Here we go. So I'm going to start. I like to go in this particular order because everything will connect together, and you'll see what I mean as I go along. My tip touches the top of the brim of the hat, and I lift, and I'm slightly curving until I get to this end right here, and my tip touches down again. Then I'm going to do the bottom part of the brim, slightly curve until I get to here. Then I connect both sides. So it's basically like a curvy rectangle right now. Then I can connect the top of the hat. So I'm lifting, going as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go, and my tip goes down. Then I'm gonna take my light green, okay? This one's not open yet. We opened the dark green for the margarita. The light green is for the cactus. I'm going to open my bag, just like we've been doing, and outlining this guy. So I like to start at the top and just kind of go with the shape. And if you notice, I didn't outline the arm yet. Okay, I'm just going straight down. I'm outlining just the body right now. Down the side, ignoring the arms. The reason why I'm doing that is because we're gonna flood these at different times. We're gonna flood the arms first, then the body. So I connect. Now I'm gonna outline the arms. So it's a brim of the hat first, then it's the top of the hat, then it's the body, the arms, and last is gonna be connecting the bottom of the hat to the cactus. So definitely rewind this if you need to see it again, but I'm going to just connect right here and right here. Hold that up so you guys can see it a little better. But there's the hat, and you can see those little yellow lines. That's the last part you'll add. So go ahead and work on that. You're going to paint the margarita, paint the cactus, and then lastly, you're going to, next outline the taco and then come back to the cactus to outline him. Once your both cactus are outlined, you're going to come back to the taco and we're going to start filling this in. So if I try to fill in this big area with this tiny hole, it would take too long and my icing would probably start to crust on me. So what I'm going to do, since I don't need a small hole anymore, I'm going to cut just a little bit more. Again, you want to still have control of the icing, and you can always cut more. I'm going to twist the bag, but you don't want to cut it too big to where you don't have control of that icing coming out. Just like we did with our transfers, instead of lifting our tip when we were outlining, we're actually going to touch our tip almost to the cookie. We're just above the cookie, and I'm squeezing. And as I squeeze, I'm getting as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go. And filling that in. So I'm going to show you a couple things right now, and then you guys are going to go back to your cookies. Fill in the taco. So I like to go around the outside first, and then I can squeeze even more. And if you notice, I'm not going to be leaving any holes. I really want to fill this in so it's nice and puffy. But it's not going to smooth out on its own. It needs help from us. Now the taco I can lift up because it's such a large cookie and it's not fragile at all. I'm going to lift it up carefully and give it a little bit of a shake. Okay, and it should smooth out just by doing that. If you do end up having any peaks or need to spread any icing out, you can use your scribe. You want to hold it like a pencil, and I like to just touch the surface. But if you're having to spread icing out a lot with your scribe tool, it probably means you did not add enough icing in there. So you just need to be mindful. You want it pretty puffy. Let's see, can you guys see how puffy that is? Just like that. Okay, if your icing is starting to spill over, you need to check this before moving on to another cookie. But if it is spilling over, you're just going to take your scribe and swipe it off. Just like that, okay? Easy peasy. But if you wait too long, what's going to happen is the icing will crust, and once you swipe it, it's going to wreck the surface of your cookie. Now I'm going to take my same yellow and just go ahead and fill in the brim. I'm not going to fill in the top of the hat because I want this brim to crust. If you look at the photo, you can kind of see there's a little bit more dimension separation with that hat. And to do that, we need to allow this to crust for a few minutes. So we're just going to fill this in. And I'm gently squeezing and jiggling and slowly lifting my tip up until it smooths out. But I can also take my scribe tool and kind of hold it like a pencil and just jiggle the surface as I move it around to where I want. And as long as you've added enough icing in there, it should smooth out. Then I'm going to take my light green, and you shouldn't need to cut your hole bigger for this, but I'm going to go ahead and fill in the arms. If your hole is super tiny, if your light green hole is super tiny, cut it a touch more, but I still want to use this to outline my lettuce. So I filled it in. It's not going to smooth out. Instead of lifting the cookie, I'm jiggling the surface. And because I added a nice big large amount, I can kind of just jiggle the surface and it will smooth itself out. I'm not digging my scribe tool in there. I'm barely touching with the tip of my scribe, and that way I don't have big old peaks to have to smooth out. So it looks full, but I'm actually going to insert my tip in there and squeeze a little bit more and jiggle until it's really puffy. Then come back with my scribe, holding it like a pencil, just jiggle the surface real quick. And again, we're gonna want these to dry before we add the body so we get that dimension. Then you can go back to your taco and you're gonna add the lettuce. And this is gonna look weird for now, but just trust the process. I'm gonna be very gentle, touching my tip to the cookie to not mess up my yellow, but I'm lifting and I'm gonna kind of do where I want my tomatoes to go. I'm gonna outline there and outline there, lifting. And you can add as many tomatoes as you'd like. We will be making those red at the end. And then I'm gonna add the lettuce. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of going to wave this a little bit. I left room at the bottom for the meat. Wave. I go all the way to the top of the cookie. Just kind of wave it until you get there. So that is just outlined in the light green. Remember, the cactus is light green, the lettuce is light green. So go ahead and work on that, and then I'll have you guys look up in just a few minutes, or whenever you're done with that, go ahead and watch some more. Now that your taco is flooded, part of your cactus is flooded, we're gonna move on to our margarita. So we're gonna take that dark green. Remember, we're using dark green for the margarita, and we're gonna outline this. So what I'm doing is I'm touching my tip on the cookie, squeezing gently, and lift. I'm going across the top of the margarita, and I'm gonna go into the lime, okay? Lifting, and then my tip goes down. And as my tip goes down, I'm looking at this little indent right here. This is where the glass will be, right here. So that's what I'm looking at. That's where I know to put my tip down. Then I will lift again and curve that. And I don't stop right at that indent. I don't put my tip down. I like to get a nice rounded curve, and if I stopped abruptly, what would happen is it wouldn't be as sharp. So I'm like going into the cookie a little bit. That will be covered with icing, so we won't see that, but it helps create a really nice curve. And I will curve this as well. Once that is outlined, I'm going to continue on with my dark green and kind of dip this a little bit right here. Okay, it's an open glass. You'll take the dark green and you're going to outline the lime next. And then lastly, you're going to take your white, make sure you give that white a nice massage, and you're going to outline the bottom of the glass. So tiny hole. The white's about the same consistency as our dark green, so it's a little bit looser. Lifting, tip down, lifting down, lifting again. Every point my tip is going down. Once you're done outlining, you're going to go back to your cactus and you're going to fill in the rest of this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and use my light green and fill in the rest of this guy. So my tip is touching. And at this point, if you need to cut your hole more because this is kind of a larger area, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and cut mine a little bit more. And then fill that in just like we've been doing, but you'll notice that allowing those other sections to crust just adds that extra dimension that we need for this cookie. Otherwise it would just look like one big piece of cactus. Fill this in. So I would say about 3 to 5 minutes is a good amount to wait while you're allowing things to crust. So see, notice no holes, but this one I don't want to lift up, so I actually just am going to take my scribe. You can even stab the cookie and give it a shake. But you don't want to stab too hard. You want to stab pretty gently, or make sure your scribe is clean and kind of just jiggle the surface until it smooths out. Then you'll take your yellow and fill in the top of the hat. Once that's done, you're going to come back to your margarita and fill this guy in. So I'm going to take my dark green or light green, whichever, and I'm going to first add a little wavy line. So I start here where the bottom of the glass is, and I lift, and I curve, and I lift again. I'm going to take my light green, I'm going to start with my light green and flood right away. You don't need to allow that outline to crust. And if you notice in the picture, there are nonpareils on this, but if I add them right away, they're going to sink in. So what I want to do is fill in this light green side first, and either wait a minute and then add the nonpareils, or go on to the next side, the dark green side, right away, and then come back to add the nonpareils. If you feel like you're going to forget to add them, I would wait the minute and then add them, and then move on to your dark green. But we don't need to wait for this to crust. We're just going to add it right away, right up against the light green. I'm going to fill that in. So it didn't really look like a huge difference in shade of green, but once you put them next to each other, there's a pretty big difference in the tone of these. Fill that in, and now I'm coming back and I'm going to add my nonpareils. Okay, so I'll take my nonpareils, and instead of tapping them on, I'm going to actually pinch them and sprinkle them on, because that way I can kind of control where they go. And I just want to try to leave them on the light green if I can. There we go. And right away, I'm going to come back to this and fill in the stem. And I'm filling in the stem right now. Normally we would let this dry, the green dry, but I noticed it's more sturdy if you flood them at the same time than separately. It cracks a lot easier. So we're just going to fill this in right now. So once you're done outlining this glass, you're going to finish flooding your your cactus, and then you can fill in your margarita glasses. Once you're done with that, press play. Next, we're going to go ahead and add our splatter. So you're going to need to take this airbrush color, it's egg yellow. I would make sure everything is moved out of the way, all your cookies are set aside, and I want to kind of get all the crumbs off of this brush, and I just do that by rubbing it against my finger. And then I'm going to take a fork, so you can just use a fork at home, but I'm going to just coat the fork with the airbrush color. And if you want to practice this on a paper towel to kind of see how it comes off before committing to your cookie, do that. Also, if you're doing this as a group, just use a fork and pass it around. But I'm going to go ahead, and it doesn't matter if you hold your fork up or down. You're going to hold it about 2 inches from the cookie, and you're going to swipe this back and forth. Okay. And if you need to coat that again, you're just going to dip it again and back and forth. I learned this from Becca from the Cookie Curator. She's amazing, and she had this little fork tip. We used to go like that or tap it, but this is much cleaner of an option. So look at how it adds that cute little realistic taco crumb Now, if you want to save this and do this on your little baby tacos, you can also do that at the end. But yeah, so once you're done with that, you want this to dry for about 30 seconds, and then you can fill in your lettuce. And I'm going to use my light green to fill in the lettuce. So now I'm going to fill in the lettuce. I prefer iceberg on my tacos. If you prefer romaine, use your dark green, but I really like the light green. So I'm just going to fill in my lettuce. You want to make sure you've done your splatter before you fill in the lettuce. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And keep going. Now you can kind of see how it's going to look with the tomatoes. Looked a little weird at first. It's coming together. That's the thing with decorated cookies. They really don't come together until your last detail. But again, Becca from the Cookie Curator did that technique, and I just loved it so much. But that is what you're going to do. When you're done with the lettuce on your taco, you're going to finish your margarita. So as long as this is crusted for about 3 to 5 minutes, you can finish your margarita. So I'm going to take my white and add kind of a wide section of white. Okay. Semi-wide, so it's about two times around. And I'm going to take my dark green and fill in the inside. So this is with the dark green. I like to use the dark green for the lime because it's up against the the light green. There's a little more separation there. And then I'm going to take my scribe while it's wet and just gently drag from the top of the white into the green, wiping off my scribe as I go. You don't need to dig your scribe in there. I'm just below the surface of the icing, and every time I swipe, I wipe off my scribe tool to clean it off. So I'm trying to bring in the white icing into the green. If you're digging in there, you're going to get gaps in the icing and probably see cookie underneath. So you want to make sure that you aren't digging your scribe all the way in there. All right, so up next, we're going to finish our taco once this crust's enough for me. And then lastly is going to be the rest of our cactus. We're going to go ahead and finish up our taco now. So again, just letting things crust for about 3 to 5 minutes before you move on to the next step. So if you just flooded your lettuce, wait about 3 to 5 minutes before doing these next couple steps. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my hole in my red pretty small because we're going to be using this red for the detail on our cactus. So you don't want too big of a hole. But I'm just going to go ahead and fill in those red tomatoes, jiggling as I fill in. You want them really puffy. And jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. So again, my hole's not big, but I'm especially going to want to keep this nice and closed as I squeeze. Going right up against the green lettuce. Then I'm going to take this brown and add the beef. Gotta have beef. And that doesn't have to be a super tiny hole, but we're going to go ahead and just, I like to outline it, kind of doing little curves, and then flood it right away. Again, as I'm flooding, I'm jiggling my tip in there to smooth it out. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And I'll do this side as well. So it's just curves going on top of the green just a little bit and then filling it in. I'm trying to fill it in so you guys can see as I do it. You don't need to let that outline dry at all. You just fill it in right away. If you want to add texture to your beef, you can let it crust for about a minute and then take your scribe and kind of poke it a little bit to add texture, but I like it all smooth. And there's our taco. So when you get to your mustaches, you'll have an extra mustache, and if it doesn't break, you can actually make a little mustache guy on the taco as well. So I'm just waiting for the transfers to dry. Once they're dry, I'm going to show you our final steps. All right, once those transfers are dry, it takes about 2 hours if you have a fan. It might take a little longer, but this is definitely something that I would wait as long as you can. But what I'm going to do is I took it off the clipboard, and I'm going to place my finger underneath the parchment and kind of pull the parchment away from the template, or sorry, the taco. So just being very careful. If your first one cracks, go ahead and hold off a little while longer before you start your next. So see how it's still very wet underneath? I probably should have waited a little bit longer. I've actually only waited like 45 minutes, but I'm gonna go ahead and take off all of my transfers, and as long as they don't crack, you should be good to go. Worst case scenario is you can just directly do the mustache on your taco, on your cactus. However, you just have to, it's not going to be as big and puffy. So there we go, success. Okay, so now once those are off, I'm going to go ahead and place them on my cookie. I'm going to take my black and add 2 dots where I want to place that mustache. Handling these extremely carefully. I'm just going to drop that on the dot that I made, like so carefully, because they're very, very fragile, and just gently as I can, press that down, and the other one as well, until they meet. It's so cute. Then I will add the taco. So it's mustache first, then taco. Now tacos are round on top. So some people in class were doing a flat taco. Make sure it's curved at the top. And then we're gonna add some eyes. Just gently move that. Some eyes. So I touch my tip on the cookie. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Release, then lift. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Release, then lift. He's got his eyes. Now we're going to add the final details, okay? Are you guys ready for this? Here we go. We want to add the little details on the hat. So my tip is touching, and I would practice this a little bit on your paper towel, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a wave up and down. Tip goes down right here. Touching, lifting, up and down. Tip goes back down. Add those nonpareils right away, otherwise they won't stick. Oops. Because this is a thinner, we did a thin line on here, so it's going to dry really quickly. Take those little balls off. Okay, and very last step is going to be the taco toppings. And he is so cute with his little taco. I just love it so much. So I'm going to do some brown here. I'm going to add a little bit of that light green. Tiny bit of red. And you can do it however you want, but I like to kind of mimic the taco that I have. Mm. Let's do a little green here. So I like to do the toppings directly on the taco once it's applied to the cookie. If you do this on the parchment, you're gonna have to re-let that dry as well. So I like to do that. But there we go. There are our cookies. They're so cute. This is probably one of my favorite sets that I have done in a very long time. I love decorating all of these, but this one is just extra cute. And tacos are probably my favorite food, so I'm very happy to do a taco cookie. But thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to transition here. I hope that you enjoyed the class, and I hope to see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.